Hi there. I would like to welcome everyone to our webinar today. This is Tanya Wade at NACR headquarters. On behalf of NACR and the NACR education team, I would like to welcome you to the evolution of recruitment marketing. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to share with you. If you are using a telephone to listen to the webinar today, avoid placing your phone on hold during the presentation. If you have a question, you may type your question in the GoToWebinar question screen in the chat area at any time. Questions will be monitored and answered at the conclusion of the presentation. If we run out of time, questions and answers will be emailed to the attendees after the presentation, and this presentation will be available on the NACR website. Now I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Joe Shaker Jr. Joe is the third generation of Shakers at Shaker Recruitment Advertising and Communications. As a boy, he prospected leads for his father from the Sunday newspaper, much like his father did before him. In his teens, he spent time working in every department within the agency. And in January of 2016, Joe succeeded his father as president. And he is now the agency's primary technology evaluator and vision caster for strategic growth. Please welcome Joe Shaker.
Thank you, Tanya, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending upon where everyone is calling in from this afternoon. Obviously, I am honored to be with you all today and looking forward to a great presentation this afternoon. Hoping to keep the presentation around 45 minutes in length and spend some time, as Tanya mentioned, afterwards to take some Q&A, and of course can make myself available afterwards. But I am honored, and Shaker being a longtime supporter of NACR, of the opportunity today to present to you all the evolution of recruitment marketing. So with that, I will kick it off. Kind of wanted to go, let's see, next slide. When we talk about the evolution of recruitment, I think it's always important to kind of at that point to take a step back. And as we take a step back in time, even kind of removing from the recruitment landscape and talk about just our world in general and how much has changed, right? When we think about just the fact that in June 29th of 2007 is when the iPhone first came to existence. YouTube wasn't here and wasn't launched until 2005. We didn't use Google Maps until 2008. When people referred to storing files, they were putting them actually in file drawers. There was no such thing as the cloud. Obviously, that has emerged. And all this, his evolution outside of our industry, though, has played a factor into how we can effectively go out now and recruit and retain talent. And change is happening very quick from both the consumer perspective, the retail perspective. Think of just how we go today and buy products. And obviously a lot has changed in the recruiting industry, but I would also tend to make the statement a lot has not. And kind of one of the things that we're going to walk through today as we kind of go through the evolution of this recruitment marketing is to kind of ease everyone's concerns and how fast things are moving, how things are changing so quick, how do we keep up with the times, and kind of, I think, just root everyone back down to the core of what we do, which is how do we go out and find talented people, and of course the most important part to it all is how do we retain them. So when we go back and we look at, in the records, and this is one of the first ads that was ever placed at Shaker, joking, but when you go back and look at maybe one of the earliest recruiters in just the U.S., we find an ad that's out there that's been around and others have presented from the Pony Express, right? So now we're going back, decades ago. And when you take a look at this ad, going way back in time, and you look at it, and we're in a moment going to see even some current ads that get published. One of the things you'll notice that even though a lot has changed, again, a lot has not, right? First and foremost, right off the bat, we can see who the company is, who the organization is, Pony Express. So right there, they're obviously designating their employment value proposition. We take a look, and we can quickly see where's the ad located, right? The city and the state, and in this case, right, it's a pretty broad range. So obviously, if this was a monster posting, I hope there's no monster people on this call right now. This would cost a significant amount of dollars because we're going to be spanning across the U.S. But then you go next, and it goes into the description of the actual, of who they're looking for. Now, one thing that for sure has changed here, legal would definitely have a problem with some of these ads. As you read the ad here, looking for young, skinny, wirely fellows, orphans preferred. So that definitely has changed from a legal and compliance perspective, but still, there is a description on who their ideal candidate is, obviously wage information, and then, of course, the call to action, which in this case, they're actually asking you to apply and come physically to their location. When you move to current, and here's are just some current ads and some current, whether they be print, online, obviously you can kind of see a very similar format, right? The images and the graphics, of course, obviously changing in terms of the means of which the ads are being communicated on, but still branding the organization, a call to action, as well as, of course, the description on who is their ideal candidate and who they are looking for. One of the biggest parts when you're looking at that evolution too is just the sheer fact of how we communicate and how candidates should communicate with organizations. This is one that obviously also drastically has evolved over time. But when you kind of look back, going back to that Pony Express ad, you see first and foremost, right, they asked them to come in, apply in person. Then the next transformation, we started asking our candidates to fax the resumes in. Fax then moved to email, then email moved into the web, which led, of course, to the rise of the applicant tracking systems. So submit your resume, moving into text, and obviously as we continue to move in beyond. Many times people and organizations and clients of ours ask, well, what's the best mode to which we should ask our candidates to communicate to us? Should we use text? Should we use email? Should we just drive them to the applicant tracking system? Should we still include fax? And ultimately, the answer, at least from a Shaker's perspective, is we really have to take a look at who you're reaching and how those candidates want to be able to communicate with you. So there is no perfect one-size-fits-all solution. And depending upon the demographic, depending upon the location, depending upon the classification of who you're looking to target, ultimately then determines on how you should have those candidates be able to communicate with you. So in many cases, in many of the ads that obviously are published by Shaker, there'll be multiple ways of which the candidates can communicate. So then there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And really, if you're going to put the candidate front and center, giving them multiple means in which they communicate with you is the ideal solution. This is constantly evolving. Here's an ad that recently was running internationally. But if you look at basically off the demographic and who they're looking to target, but more importantly, what I'm just kind of showing here is how fast things, of course, are changing, and its applications are only available and acceptable via Snapchat. So just, again, something that I think we all are monitoring. Obviously here you can get a good idea of who they were trying to reach in that profession, realizing that these types of candidates, this is their preferred way of communicating and allowing them to engage in those conversations that way. Just recently, too, internationally, you might have seen news announcements of McDonald's in Australia who did a similar type of approach, allowing candidates to apply for positions via Snapchat. So just as we go through change and evolution, I think it's also important to take a step back to take a look at what has changed, too, even in the last 10 years, is, of course, just the supply and demand, right? Many times in this industry, kind of how we recruit and how difficult it is goes with obviously the economics of our country. What is the unemployment rate? How many people are out there looking? Years ago, we all heard of the war for talent. It was coming. It was going to increase, make it extremely difficult to find talented candidates across the spectrum. And obviously that push with the Great Depression was delayed. Individuals are working longer. And now the war for talent obviously is transforming into the workforce cliff. You're starting to see inclinations already and factors of where organizations that positions that were not easy to fill are becoming harder and harder to get applicants and qualified applicants. More and more organizations, right, are out there aggressively recruiting. So, one of the things that definitely also has changed outside of the industry is just the competitiveness in which organizations are recruiting. This is nothing new, obviously, in the healthcare arena. For those, obviously, of us that have been recruiting RNs, even in the recession, we've had difficulty, and obviously, you've already felt that pain point. But I'm sure even in your organizations, institutions, some of the roles outside of your typical healthcare, allied health, facilities, custodial staff, right? These are positions that maybe at one point you posted were flooded with applications are starting to obviously see a decrease. So it is something obviously that I think makes it important that we also then build a strategy so that when you go to market, you can compete for this talent effectively. Another thing that has changed, and I think this is something that is exciting for our industry, positive for our industry, is that really, I always tend to say the secret is now out. Not many people knew about talent acquisition, recruitment. There's a few of us in the agency world. Obviously, newspapers were well aware of the talent acquisition marketplace, and then, of course, organizations. But outside of that, many people didn't really understand our industry. There weren't many players in it. And that, unfortunately, to the demise of it, kind of didn't allow us to evolve or move from a marketing perspective as fast as we are moving now. And so what has changed, and I think it, obviously is the likes of big brands like Monster coming to market, and obviously Career Builder and the Super Bowl commercials has brought a lot of attention and a lot of venture capitalists and dollars and mergers and acquisitions to our industry. And many people say, well, this is competitiveness. This is this is going to make it more difficult to recruit. And we argue this is actually what is propelling our industry and making it even more efficient for some of our organizations to go out and find that talent, because these companies that obviously, just from the likes of even Google and Facebook, obviously have significant ways and means of which we can go find people. And now that they obviously are having an interest in our industry, are creating even more tools that are at our disposal. So this is kind of one of the things that, at least from our perspective, does excite us. It's changing quick. Obviously, you have a lot of mergers and acquisitions and marriages, just obviously most recently, of course, with the Microsoft $26 billion acquisition of LinkedIn. You have supposedly next week, it will be official, the Career Builder acquisition for $1 billion. Monster's acquisition just last couple months ago to Randstad Sourcing. And then, of course, for those of us found the news even just last week, the announcement that Google, it's their second announcement in the last 6 months into the talent acquisition. First was their announcement of creating a Google's Jobs API, where they're taking their algorithm and going to, as they made it easier for us to search and find websites, they're taking that same algorithm and hopefully being able to match jobs to what people are searching for. And then their announcement last week with Google Hire, which many are out touting as going to be an applicant tracking system. So it has made 2 announcements. And then, of course, Facebook, their announcement in terms of now allowing organizations to have jobs distributed into Facebook, of course, sponsor those jobs, and promoting those jobs, as well as Facebook Workplace, which would be more of an internal communications piece, but again, entries and points into the talent acquisition. This doesn't include on this slide many startups, right, that have emerged out of Silicon Valley. Here where I'm based in Chicago, there's many startups. Organizations that have been in the industry for a while and then pivoting and creating new solutions based off of what they're seeing in the marketplace. So some of these we'll talk about as we move through the presentation today. So this is all, I feel, good news, but definitely as you look at it and as you just talk about how has our industry changed and evolved over times, here is one where I think just from a standpoint of industry growth and expansion and emergence of new players to the space. And then also, I think many people, obviously when you look at talent acquisition and the term, even being a new term, relating recruitment marketing and how it obviously is very similar to consumer marketing. And many are now obviously saying what we do is just a form of marketing. At Shaker, we tend to argue that is correct. Employment marketing is a version of marketing. But I would argue, and all this in this call I think would agree, what we do in talent acquisition and talent marketing is a lot harder than what is done in the consumer marketing arena. Getting someone to buy a product, purchase a product, I feel is easier than what we try to do, and that's convincing someone to quit their job, obviously, and come work for a new employer. In that case, even potentially even relocating and uprooting your family. But there are definitely, from a similarity perspective, and from kind of when you're looking at the industry, you can draw the similarities between what organizations do in the marketing arena and how does that relate into employment marketing. So kind of when you're kind of looking down that path, and a lot of times when explaining that even just internally to organizations, to the CEOs, to the CMOs, how to best describe that kind of transformation from marketing to employment marketing is when you look at what does an organization do when they brand themselves, it's consumer branding. Well, in our case, in our world, right, that's going to be called employment branding. When an organization goes to market and advertises their solution, whether it be B2B, B2C, we all know that term, advertising. In our world, right, we're going to call that recruitment marketing. And then when you talk about in Marketing 101, the next thing you're going to talk about is the whole customer experience, user experience, and in our arena, we're going to call that the candidate experience. So as we move through the presentation, and is kind of what we address today, we're going to look at all three of these, employment branding, recruitment marketing, and candidate experience. And sometimes I'll use customer experience, advertising, consumer branding, but just for purposes to keep everyone on the same playing field, that's what we're referring to. We're going to talk about employment branding, recruitment marketing, and the candidate experience. And why are we going to talk about those three components? It's because that's how you effectively recruit. You have to have the right message, you have to have the right media, and you have to have the right experience. And if either one of those are broken, if one of those are not working effectively, the whole process breaks down. And so many times people are saying, well, what's the right solution? What job board do I need to be on? That's not the question you should be asking or should be looking at. What we should be looking at is that whole process. And it starts with the brand. The brand is at the center of it all. And again, we're going to dig deep into each of these. Now, each of these presentations, of course, could be their own hour-long presentation in length, which I'm going to try to do in the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. But this is kind of the process where when we say, how do you effectively recruit? It's, again, right message, right media, and the right experience, which is going to allow you to effectively communicate and recruit in this landscape. So when we talk about employment branding, and we're, again, thinking like a marketer, this is your consumer brand. And so many times people say, well, your employment brand is just your consumer brand. And the argument against that is they are not the same. They are similar. Your employer brand is going to come off of what your company brand is, but it does need to have a life of its own. And so kind of the definition of what we feel from an employment branding perspective is the intersection where your company culture, reality, and perception as an employer meet. It is lived out, the employee experience, and the promise of the employee experience. To the candidates, the employer brand embodies an organization's mission, vision, collection, personality, and how a company can be defined in terms of its reputation and identity as an employer. So in summary, what is this employment value brand? It's your EVP, your employment value proposition. And that is, it is, in quick synopsis of it, is why should an individual consider working for your organization? And that's what we're trying to uncover. That's what as an organization, if you have not figured out yet, you need to figure out. Because that is what's going to allow you to differentiate yourself. And so many times, people ask, well, how do you do it, right? And how has this changed? 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, 65 years ago when my grandfather started this company, employment branding did not exist. It was just create a pretty ad, right? It was just that last bullet point. Me and all my agency friends, we created good-looking, compelling, and engaging ads to get you to act, right? And there were pages upon pages of them in the Sunday papers for some of us that may recall those days, or as Tanya nicely brought me back in time, how I used to go back and circle them and get paid a jelly bean for each one. But that's all it was. It was just creating creative ads. And ultimately, over time, and as our industry evolved, you found out it isn't just that, right? I mean, just create an ad, and if it's not based or tied to authenticity, being truthful, and being credible, all it's going to do is just get more applicants to flood your doors, fill your applications. But ultimately, once they get there day one, what they saw in the ad, it essentially could not be true. And so in the consumer world, right, that's considered false advertising. And so what happens in false advertising, if you buy a product that is oversold, you return it, right, and you complain. In our world, if you see false advertising or if you respond to an ad and it's not the truth, you're going to leave. So not only does you got hired, we now have a retention issue. And nowadays, too, of course, they can now have outlets, right? So then they go to Glassdoor, and they start obviously writing reviews about what's being said about the organization is not accurate, and obviously that can have more negative backlash than positive. So it is important as you go down this path that it is authentic and it is truthful into who you are, based off of who you're trying to reach and who the mission and the goals of the organization. While doing that too, you want to be different, right? We always will argue it's one thing to just kind of be the same as others, but find that uniqueness. What is different from you versus your competition? And it's taking those two bullet points is what allows you to get to that EVP. And how does one do it? And again, in essence of time, trying to do this into one slide is kind of taking a look at the external perception of your organization. So you are going to go outside of your company, outside of the walls, understand who your key audience is, who are the key drivers, who's your key employers, employees. Who are your competitors? And this can obviously, of course, vary from segments as well as locations. But taking that information, coupled with your internal perception. So there's where you want to then talk to your employees. Find out why people have been with you 5, 10, 15 years. Find out why people have been with you for a year. What made them leave one organization and come work for you? And then, of course, the vision of the organization. Where is the vision going? And this is obviously getting to the C-suite and find out where is the company going. And ultimately, in the middle of this all, that's where your EVP lies, is being able to take the kind of cross-section between the external, the internal, and of course the vision of the organization that ultimately allows you to get you to that employment value proposition. Once we get to that, that then is what leads into the creative execution. So if you skip the step of the research and going through the external and the internal, really then what we're doing is create an aspirational campaign. So it's not employment branding. It is creative. It can be done because in some cases, right, we all know how recruitment works. Sometimes you have to be pretty quick. You got to get ads to market fast. But by skipping over these steps, you're not doing an employment branding campaign. You'll be doing an aspirational campaign. Once you got the brand, and now we got the right message. Now it's obviously going over to the right media. Here's one, of course, that has drastically changed over the 6 decades that we've been in business. I would say for the first 40, right, it stayed pretty static, as we mentioned earlier, right? There wasn't much evolution in terms of the options that were out there to employers. It was running your ad, again, in the Sunday paper, and the only question was picking up at the repeat rate or running an ad ROP versus in the classified section, and maybe some trade journals. Because of marketing 101 and consumer, right, it came into more targeted advertising, right? All of a sudden in the consumer world, and we see it all day now, every day when we're surfing the web, those products that you've been looking at on Amazon and Zappos just continue to follow us through the web. Travel locations that you're researching start to follow you through the web. And this same type of targeted advertising is available today from a recruitment perspective and getting even stronger and stronger as we move through and get more sophisticated with the targeting capabilities. And so I would argue kind of where the evolution of recruitment marketing has gone is it went from thousands of endpoints and thousands of newspapers and trade journals to then the big 3 or big 4, Monster Career Builder, Hot Jobs, LinkedIn. And now it's moving back to thousands and thousands of endpoints again. But now it's across media different segments, right? There's industry-specific segments. For instance, right in the healthcare space, we all know Nurse.com, National Healthcare Career Network, Healthy Careers, American Physical Therapy Association, neonatal nurse practitioner jobs, right? There's a lot of niche job boards targeting disciplines and occupations, as well as then you can get even into the locality factor of where some of our municipalities are and hospitals and locations are, and looking at where those local solutions. You still have the broader sites, right, like the Monsters and the Career Builders of the world, but then you got Glassdoor, and you got LinkedIn, and then you got the search aggregators with Indeed and Juju and Simply Hired, which is now transformed into Indeed. And then you've got sourcing solutions, where you got resume services that many of these provide resume database accesses, or third-party sourcing solutions like Intello and Hiring Solved. I would argue probably almost every day there's a new player out there that says we can handle all of your recruitment needs and all your recruitment marketing. And the answer to that, no matter if it's LinkedIn or if it's Monster, if it's Career Builder, if it's even Indeed, obviously our theory is diversification. And you're going to want to get to a strategy that is going to allow you to reach the masses and try to incorporate and get to as many places as we can and stretch your budget so that your ad is seen in multiple different endpoints. Because on average, we see the user interacts with an ad 17 different times on 17 different outlets. And so trying to just put all your eggs into one basket obviously is not going to be a solution that works. So working within obviously your client's budgets, we're trying to add that diversification and bringing you into job boards, aggregators, sourcing platforms, social media providers, cost per application providers, geofencing, search engine marketing. Again, all of them have merits, and everyone says, well, what's the right one? What's the best source? It goes back to the conversation like we said earlier, where you're located and who you're looking to reach. And that allows us to then be able to build a plan to suit and to find those people. When many people are nowadays talking about recruitment marketing and where it's going, a term that's getting thrown out a lot that you probably read about, you've seen about, you've heard about, obviously it's programmatic. Now this is, again, in the consumer arena, nothing new. It's been something that has been going on for years from a consumer marketing perspective. Fairly new in the recruitment marketing arena. I do think it's definitely where the strategy and where recruitment marketing will go. It's going to take some time. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. There are many players out there touting that they are in the programmatic ad buying space, but in summary, there's really only a few platforms that would even allow for it. But it's not even the platforms that allow for the communication for programmatic buying to work. It's more around the platforms and where they can distribute the ads to. So you have to have endpoints. And for those that aren't familiar with the term, I mean, programmatic is basically allowing you to make real-time buying decisions on media in real time and making those adjustments immediately instead of just setting it and kind of forgetting it. The issue that we're seeing is just we need to get more inventory, meaning more sites. So when you go back to some of those niche sites in the healthcare arena, right, they're not playing or partnering in the programmatic space. So if you're using solutions that can programmatically display ads, if the endpoints are not participating in it, right, you're losing out on potential audience. Right now, many of the large sites are Monster, CareerBuilder, Indeeds, and the likes, and the aggregators, and some obviously job boards like Beyond and the likes. But some of these niche sites are not. So it's not something that we go all in on, and it does, again, vary based upon discipline, based upon location, who you're looking to reach, and whether or not programmatic is something that should fit in the solution today or something that we should watch. But where is it going to go? Of course, like anything, obviously computers are making things way more efficient and effective, and obviously that is what programmatic is doing. It's allowing us to make these decisions quicker and faster and moving budget accordingly. When you're next kind of moving through, you got the right message out and we're using the right media, you're kind of looking just even at the candidate experience. Right now we're looking at that customer experience journey. This is a slide I actually saw from Indeed that touts that 91% of all people, according to their stats, are out there looking for employment. So this is always one of those arguments. Well, I want to reach active and passive job seekers. There's really no such thing as passive job seekers when you got 91% of the population. That one's always looking for a change. That may not be going to job boards and searching as as effectively as some others, but truly everyone, if given the right opportunity and sold at the right time, might consider that change. And Indeed kind of proves that fact by saying that 91% of the population are out there actively looking for work. But consider the change as something really outside we can't control from a recruitment marketing perspective. But when you get into step 2, considering your company, that's kind of where your EVP sits, right? This is when someone decides, yeah, I'm interested in looking for an opportunity, I'm going to make a change, and they start perusing, they start to see ads for your company, or displaying ads to them on CNN where they may not have considered the change, but all of a sudden they see your message and it resonates well with them and what's something that they're looking for. They've considered your company. That's the value. Right step right there is where your EVP can help move them through the journey. Next step will be, consider the position, right? So that's taking that EVP and being able to execute it accordingly and going back to creating an ad that's going to be compelling enough, creating a job description that's going to be compelling enough, that's going to obviously sell them. which in our world, step 4, is apply. As soon as they hit the apply button, they've now become, in the consumer world, a customer, right? But in our world, they're a candidate. And now this is where you kind of enter the user experience or candidate experience. And for many of our organizations and kind of where we are at, this is, I think, where you can never spend enough dollars in investment in. Because at this point, they made the decision, I am going to apply, but then many times we send them to a career site that kind of can look like this. It's a slide from, for those of you who are aware, Jerry Crispin that I've taken from. But we've got them, we've sold them, and we're going to now make them jump through 2 hoops, go obviously over some fire, and then ultimately they're going to go into a black hole and they're never going to hear from anyone. Maybe 3 months later we respond to them with a message, but at that point, right, they've already been turned off. This would never happen in the consumer arena, but has happened for so long in the candidate space. It's changing. I think companies are realizing this, obviously seeing the value of addressing in your own career site. There are many solutions, many providers out there that obviously can help supplement and help make this process a little bit more streamlined. But this is, again, going back to why it is essential that you don't stop with the messaging and the branding and the media, that we also have to look at the experience. It can't be 13 clicks in 30 minutes for your candidates to be able to apply for a position. You can't hope that the candidate writes the right keywords or searches using the right keywords to find the right job. We have to make it as efficient as Amazon makes it efficient for us to purchase products. Because once you got them, and you got them convinced, and we got them on the hook, you can't afford to lose them. And I think Google is helping make this even more efficient, right? As I said earlier, Google has announced, multiple different solutions that they're coming into the space. But as you'll notice, even just, I would recommend and just kind of see where your own company shows up. But here's an example of a client, jobs at Siemens. And if you do that front and center, right, Google's taking a snippet and actually not just sending you directly to the career site, but actually can even take you in directly to specific job racks. Right, so just no different than what we've done forever in the consumer. When you type in products, it takes you right directly to the products, or in some cases into Amazon. You're starting to see in the user search, in the career search, where Google is even allowing the candidates to get right to it. So now, if they were to click on this systems engineer technology innovation in Salt Lake City, Utah, from Google is going to be 1 click to apply, just like it's 1 click to purchase from Amazon. So that's where this investment can only just get stronger and stronger in your own career site. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different types of recruiting platforms that are out there. Many of them, I even just last week, there's a new one, a CRM that came out, Beamery, that got $5 million in funding. These are 4 that have probably been around the longest, have the longest tenure, have definitely the Rolodex of organizations that are currently using them, and have the capabilities to address mobile apply, desktop, analytics, content management systems, talent communities. Each of them have their own strong suits, and again, we can talk on the side on the strengths of Jive and differentiations between Jive and Phenom and Smashfly and Aperture. But like I said, these are just 4 that are out there that sit on top of your applicant tracking system, right? None of these players are taking over the ATS space. They just work in conjunction with and make a more streamlined, user-friendly candidate experience. Where is it going? Just like we mentioned, the recruitment marketing arena, this area is continuing to get a significant amount of investment in. It's obviously moving, I think, obviously into artificial intelligence. So just like in the marketing arena, right, we see how much AI and artificial intelligence is becoming a factor in just the consumer or marketing arena. That same thing is happening here in the evolution of recruitment marketing, and using machines here to make that experience even more easier, successful, and more real-time for candidates. An organization that's pretty fairly new, a company called Recruiting.ai. The name of their AI individual is Olivia. You can actually text to 708-218-9516, so the phone number at the top of the screenshot here. If you text the word jobs, you can kind of see it in real time how Olivia works. But utilizing artificial intelligence in this example, Olivia is taking the candidate through a pre-screening question. So before they even get to the recruiter, before they even apply, the candidate can give some information that will then obviously checks with your organization, and we're making the journey that's that much easier for the candidate and to actually even see if this is someone that should be moved through the application process. Artificial intelligence is being utilized. There's other organizations that are working on the back end where you're using it to schedule meetings with recruiters. So getting that whole interviewing and scheduling of the interviews between them, the candidates and the hiring managers and yourself, and automating that process. So artificial intelligence has gotten into that arena. It's come in the arena through sourcing. So being able to just type in, here's my ideal types of candidates, and utilizing artificial intelligence, they go out and obviously would cast the web and look for candidates, engage in conversations with the candidates to find out if they're interested in working for you, and then ultimately supplying that candidate then back to recruiters. So even using artificial intelligence to do that initial search. This scares a lot of people and saying, well, this is going to replace my recruiters. There's no way we feel that it is. I mean, talent acquisition, again, different from consumer marketing, is a people business, right? We have to engage in real-time conversations with these people. That said, technology, right, can enhance it. We can finally now get to these candidates in real time, as in the moment they submit their application. Even if you don't have it, the old reason was, well, we just don't have enough people to be able to communicate with them. Well, this is where I think artificial intelligence can help perfect that. So when they do submit their resume, they're not going to that dark hole. So we create the good user experience, get them through, application received, and the next thing you know, they're getting pinged by who they think is a recruiter, but it's Olivia, and there's many other names out there. But this is just one that obviously I think has gone the furthest that we've seen so far. But the journey is not done. Once obviously they have applied, they get through the initial screening, right? Now this kind of gets into the recruiter experience, right? Not the candidate experience, but the recruiter experience, and what do we do with them? You know, they've applied to you. They're now again that customer, that candidate. So obviously, hopefully they move into the offer stage. And if they move into the offer stage, it's going to be extremely important that we continue to carry the employment brand, the messaging, right, that was laid to them at the on-front, all the way through their onboarding, their employment engagement, training development, right? And then they move into internal communications. So how do we retain them? Because that truly is the key to this all. We don't want to lose them. So carrying that employment brand message, not just from the moment they saw the ad to apply, but all the way through their whole entire employment journey. And then for those that obviously don't get the offer and they don't get the decline, close the loop, close the gap. Tell them, obviously, inform them, obviously, of the decision. It's not an easy decision. None of us like to make. But by even giving that candidate the experience of telling them that they have been turned down, giving them reasonings or giving them justifications or providing some sort of recommendations is kind of going to set you, again, apart from your competition, because you never know when you might have to re-engage back with that talent. So I wouldn't just close it completely. Have them join a talent community. Stay in conversations, stay in communications with them, because even though they weren't a fit today, whether they weren't a fit for you or you weren't a fit for them today, they may be 5 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. Or, obviously, like rule of thumb, that candidate could know 3 or 4 other people. So we've even actually seen where instead of using your employees for employee referrals, you obviously can have your candidates can be obviously referral tools as well. So declining it and doing it in a way and giving them the response and keeping them engaged, because as we said earlier, it's become harder and harder to find talented individuals. And so we never want to say no, and obviously always keep the conversation going. I was going to end with kind of a little bit of a quote which I think is important for us all from Steve Jobs. I think if anyone kind of understood talent acquisition in HR, it was Steve Jobs, someone that took a brand that wasn't the brand that is obviously today. Obviously, they were an organization that was going through severe difficulties. In some cases, many thought they were going to go out of business if it wasn't for Microsoft even giving them some money. Who knows where Apple would have gone today. But Steve understood the importance of really going out and hiring the best in the world. And it was by hiring those individuals is what obviously allowed him to then create products and innovate and obviously create and become the company is today. So in anything that you read about Steve, you'll see the value that he places in his employees and how important it is. And that's kind of where I think also many other organizations are now at, where CEOs of companies are saying, you know what, your CFO is important, right? He runs the finance, she runs the finances, and your chief marketing officer, he or she runs the marketing of the organization. So there is no balance sheet, and there is no marketing of your organization unless you have the people. And so that, CHRO and their recruiters are so essential to that company, which is another reason why I think there's been so much evolution and change in this space, is that it's just media companies, but even companies themselves are realizing the importance of what we're all doing today. I was going to I have some takeaway slides that kind of just, give some talking points and some tips for recruiters about writing job descriptions, digs a little bit deeper, obviously, into your employment brand that I can kind of walk through for the next 15 minutes, or we can definitely open up to questions and open it up, and if depending on time, we can take it from there.
Yes, we have a couple of questions already, and I invite people to go ahead and ask their questions, and we've got about 15 minutes to get those answered. The first question, Joe, is do you know of any healthcare organization that is doing the one-click applications like Amazon?
So I have a one-click application. You can look at BJC Healthcare. They are a current company on Jibe and have one click where they have a simple apply flow, and they also have it where you can join their Avature talent community. Okay,
thank you. And then we have another question. How much does Olivia cost, and are there other AI competitors?
So Olivia, I will tell you, is very new. For those of you that might remember, it's actually owned and funded by a guy by the name of Aaron Mathos. Aaron is the former CEO founder of Jobbing. If you remember, jobbing.com is still in existence, local job sites and thriving. That's now run by a different individual, and Aaron now heads up Olivia. The pricing is based on number of jobs and number of employees. So depending upon the size of your organization and the level of which you need Olivia. So is it just for pre-screening qualification questions, or is it going to do scheduling and interviewing? So the more you use Olivia, obviously, then the higher the costs go.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting for other questions to come in, if you want to walk through a few of your takeaway slides, that would be great.
Sure. And like I said, I would share the presentation afterwards. But some key takeaways that I think are always important as you kind of looking as a marketer, right? When you think of the mindset, when you're looking at who is it you're looking to target. So it's no longer just I'm looking for RNs, I'm looking for PTs, I'm looking for OTs, I'm looking for physical therapists, I'm looking for marketing people. We want to know a little bit more, and as your recruiters are too. So having those conversations with the recruiters and with the hiring managers, like a marketing firm would have about your consumer targets. What's the demographics, age range, geographic location level, family structure, hobbies, history, what's important to them, pain points. And why these questions are important is it allows us then to get into the mind of who is it that we're trying to reach and where these potential candidates could be. Right? We don't just have to rely, as we said, over 90% of the population is technically out there looking for work. They may not be just actively looking on job boards. So the more we know about who your ideal target is, the more we can go outside of those typical means of the recruiting world and find those people. Again, Facebook, Google search targeting are two of the key main areas, or geofencing. So that's definitely something that I would always take a look at as you're looking at those targeting capabilities, but get in the minds of who it is and who is it that you're trying to reach. Once you do that, of course, you've got to kind of go through the EVP. We know that's not something you can do every time. It's not something that is obviously something that is quick, easy to do. So, it's also the job descriptions, your ads, right? Write them with an impact. Start with the job title, start with the description. Make it compelling and speak to them, right? Don't just have the legal document in terms of, all right, this is a legal approved job description. Market it. Sell the organization, sell the job. The best job descriptions, we say, right, combine a little bit of the marketing, the reality of the role. So be authentic again, be truthful. Tell them what skills are needed so that if they don't have it, right, they'll know right off the front that they don't have those skills, and obviously not waste anyone's time. Focus on the growth and development and show there's opportunity, of course, and highlight what it's like to work with you and what is your differentiation. How are you different than maybe some of the companies you've been losing talent to? It's important too. We feel many times this is overlooked, but if a job has been in the applicant tracking system, you have some of those evergreen recs or those jobs that are just always open, those RN jobs that you always know you're going to need and keep up there. Keep refreshing the job though. So at least every 60 to 90 days, I would. If you can, do it every 30. I understand sometimes internally that can cause issues, opening and closing recs, but it is important. The largest job site out there, Indeed, stops aggregating a job after 120 days. You definitely don't want to get a job past that date because then you're going to lose not only the organic traffic, but you won't even be able to sponsor it. So with each passing day, more and more jobs are getting added, and keeping your job fresh and relevant is important. So it's not just the way it's written, but even obviously from a technology perspective, make sure those are getting updated. Same thing here, just some other ideas about when writing job descriptions, because these are obviously a lot of times people ask these types of questions. So hopefully, again, could be just some nice takeaways for your team or for your recruiters. Make it easy, make it simple, make the titles concise. We recommend nothing more than 80 characters. What's important, put it in the beginning. Don't use abbreviations, right, that no one's going to recognize or understand outside of your institution. So many times that happens. Not only do the candidates not know what that means or potentially what it means or what it's describing, but nor do the search engines, right? So that it doesn't just hurt the candidate experience, it also hurts your search engine optimization. And avoid all caps and common abbreviations.
Joe, I did have one additional question come in.
Yep.
You mentioned external candidates for employee referrals. Do you have a hospital that is doing it?
I have a hospital that will do an alumni, again, using their talent community, so those employees are leaving, re-engaging, obviously, with them and staying in conversation and keeping an alumni group. And then we have the ones that are, unfortunately, get the non-offer, are asked to join the talent community, and yes, they get segmented into a different bucket where if they're using their appropriate content management system, we can communicate with them. Not a campaign where we've messaged them and said, hey, can you go refer other candidates to us or pay referral fees. There's a new site, and I'm drawing a name of it right now, that is out there that is doing that and actually is allowing individuals to be even paid for it. If you notice, Indeed has launched a product too where they're actually paying job seekers. If they know someone that's out there for looking for work and they see a job and they may not be a fit and you make the referral, Indeed actually has created a new solution where they'll pay that candidate American Express gift cards for making the referral to one of their friends if they get hired. So I think it's on the cusp, and I think it's becoming something that's going to be becoming more and more widely accepted.
Okay, thank you.
Just other ideas, thinking like a recruiter, don't just go to the job fairs, go to meetups, go to conferences, universities, again, thinking outside the box. Communicate with them, right? Don't just use LinkedIn, get outside of the LinkedIn umbrella, message them via email, phone. You can't rely just on one way to get in touch with these people. So phone call, no one's phone doesn't read anymore. I even argue in some cases, right? Direct mail, which is, again, another great way, even in the healthcare space, for those that aren't familiar with Caton Direct. I highly recommend. It's another product that I would recommend and solution. But direct mailing individuals, right? We don't get many phone calls or mail. So it is, when you get those calls, you get that piece of information at the home, it is recognizable. So again, going places where your competition's not, and getting them at a touch point when they least expect it. And then maintain the relationship. This kind of goes back to what we were even talking about before, past employees, people that obviously were not accepted, maintaining that kind of relationship and one-to-one conversation. So never want to lose touch points with any of them. And so messaging is important. That's why I go back to how the career site's important, but even the technology and the tools in which we are communicating with them. If you're able to just communicate to someone upon submitting an application and then they get contacted by a recruiter immediately, you're already going to be one step ahead of the competition. So just talking to these people and putting the human back into the recruiting process, whether it be through technology like artificial intelligence, they'll think it's a person. I think it obviously would make a significant impact. It does already on the consumer, right? We see it. Why is Zappos the brand that they are from a customer perspective? It's because of their customer service. If they get back to you and they respond to you, we should take that same process to the candidate side as well. And then, last slide here was just kind of about, summarizing it all, identifying your target audience, understand what drives them, what motivates them, listen to them, cultivate their interests, and invest the time and effort and nurture that connection. Even if it's not immediate, it obviously could be something 30, 60, 90, a year down the road. Because you never understand what they might be for the job today. It defines out, right fit candidates are in the future. And so we don't want to miss that connection. And that's, marketing 101, but that's what I think how recruitment marketing is evolving to today.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe, very much. We appreciate your time this afternoon. On behalf of NACR and the NACR education team, I thank you, and I thank all of the folks who attended the presentation today. The recording will be available probably sometime next week. And if you have any questions that come up afterwards, you can just email them to me, Tanya Wade, twade@kmgnet.com, and I'll be happy to pass those along to Joe. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.